So tonight we are looking at a crisis that starts at the petrol pump and ends at your dinner table. As conflict continues abroad, global oil prices have spiked, hitting over $110 a barrel. For Pakistan, a country that imports almost all of its fuel, the math is simple and painful. When global prices go up, our national wallet empties. We are now seeing petrol prices at record highs, making every commute and every delivery more expensive than ever before. This isn't just about cars, it's about the cost of living. When fuel prices rise, the price of everything follows. From the truck moving wheat to the tractor in the field, the hidden cost of oil is being added to your grocery bill. Inflation is squeezing the middle class and hitting the most vulnerable even harder. Families are being forced to choose between filling their tanks or filling their cupboards as the rupee struggles to keep its value against these rising global costs. And then there are the lights. Because we rely on expensive imported fuels to run many of our power plants, the high cost of oil and a shortage of imported LNG has led to a familiar and frustrating problems. Load shedding for some, and the government's enforcement of the necessary austerity and conservation measures, which are impacting business activity across the country. It is a perfect storm of energy, economy, and endurance. How does Pakistan break the cycle? Today, let's do a deep dive. And joining me to discuss this is Dr. Abid Suleri. He's a social policy analyst, development economist, and executive director of Sustainable Development Policy Institute. He's also a well-known columnist who writes on political economy. Also joining me is Mr. Ammar Habib Khan. He's a macroeconomist, energy economist, risk management professionals, and is known for his expertise on the energy sector. Very grateful to both of you for joining me. Dr. Abid Suleri, the conflict clearly is refusing to end. Even today, the latest developments show that the Iranians are not backing down, and the Americans, of course, are refusing to accept the fact that they don't have the kind of leverage that they think they do. So this could continue despite Pakistan's best efforts to find a peaceful solution. Because of the uncertainty, oil prices, again, they were very high. We have suffered or endured this situation for 2 months now, Pakistan. How bad are things looking now, and if this continues for a couple of more weeks, what will the average Pakistani have to endure?
Well, thank you very much, Fahd. It's not only Pakistan. First of all, for the viewers, I think we need to recognize that this oil crisis is much larger and much deeper than the 1970s oil crisis, at least 5 times high in magnitude than what the world saw in 1973s. Now, when we look at the whole bigger picture, the Gulf countries, they are losing out around 12 million barrel per day of oil production that otherwise they could have produced and they could have pumped in global supply chain. If one looks at, for example, the hotel residency, compare it with the last year, April to April numbers, UAE's hotel residency is 65% shrunk. In case of Bahrain, it's 90% less than what it was in these days last year. Similarly, if one looks at Qatar, it's 55% less than last year's average hotel residency. And these are huge numbers which will be impacting the Gulf economies. And it is IMF's prediction is that Qatar's GDP would be affected by at least minus 10%. It would remain minus 10%. UAEs would get affected by minus 3%. And this is the scenario in which we have to place Pakistan, and we have to see that where exactly we are. Now, this crisis, it affects the countries which have a high level of external debt. It affects a country who are which are dependent on imported fossil fuel from Gulf countries, which don't have the foreign currency reserves and which don't have the fiscal cushion to take care of the relief
So,
for their citizen. And on the basis of this criteria, the Economist magazine last month, it ranked Pakistan as number second among the most vulnerable economies that would get affected.
which is a very dangerous situation. Let me just bring in Ammar Saab also, and then Dr. Saab, I'll just come back to you. Ammar Saab, in terms of this, the impact that we are facing, uh, how bad could it get? I mean, how worse could it get actually? Let me put it that way.
Pakistan has surprisingly been more resilient than expected. I mean, if the same thing would have happened, let's say 3 years back, the situation would have been much worse. But if this continues, if the blockade continues, and if oil prices keep on increasing, then we will see a lot worse things happening. We may see higher inflation levels. We may see much more lower growth over the next 2 to 3 years. And that will not just be in Pakistan, but that will basically be across the world. So it's entirely recessionary period. May see the world may actually see a recessionary period over the next few years if this continues for, let's say, another 4 to 6 months, because a lot of these countries, you've got the likes of Japan and the European Union, the South Korea, are dependent on imported fuels, and they are losing out on the reserves right now. So as reserves lose out, as the reserves start to diminish, there will be more panic in the market, because all of these countries, European Union or Japan, they have like a year or 2 years of reserves. But as they keep on diminishing, as they keep on depleting those reserves, a lot may happen, prices may increase. Alternatively, we may see Russia supplying more fuel to the market and balancing it out as well. So we may not see any period of sustained growth, but it is entirely possible we may see a few years of low growth across
But
the
if you
world.
look at it from the average Pakistani citizen's point of view, what is the kind of impact that every Pakistani should be ready for? How will it affect their lives in the coming few months?
So it directly depends on how our policies are and how we are able to mitigate the price of petrol. For example, our petrol price right now is somewhere pegged in the range of $120 of Brent. I do not see prices increasing to maybe more than 150 or 200 for that matter. At 150, everything basically starts collapsing, and even oil companies do not want it to go that high. And so in that case, I do not see any significant impact. Whatever's been done, it's been done. Petrol prices may stay in this range, plus minus 50. Behavioral changes are already there. A lot of impact has been absorbed. So you do not see in other countries things are much worse. So and more importantly, Pakistan has not been dependent on imported oil for that matter for generation of power, for generation of electricity. So on that front, we were fairly secure, and we have been fairly resilient because of a lot of nuclear, hydel, and local coal that we have been using. So a lot of problem is with transportation. A lot of that has been absorbed, and if the government does not subsidize this for longer stretches of time, I do not see any significant inflation coming out of this for the next I would say few months.
Okay, that's encouraging. Dr. Abid Suleri, this is encouraging, as encouraging can be. I was expecting much more worse, but Ammar Saab seems to think that we've already gone through the worst and things can't really get that bad. Would you also agree with his assessment, or do you think that when it comes to energy issues or any other issues that directly affect the life of a common Pakistani, that things could be a bit more worse?
Now, Fahd, that depends if we are talking of fiscal year or if we are talking of calendar year. If it is a fiscal year which would end on 30th of June, perhaps we won't see much impact on GDP growth, because IMF was about to revise upward our GDP numbers due to this crisis in the Middle East. IMF didn't revise this, didn't do this upward revision, and that's where perhaps we won't lose much of the GDP. But for the next fiscal year, I can foresee lot difficult and lot harsher, both for public as well as for government. Today, the price of Arab Light, the Saudi Arabia oil that Pakistan is getting from Red Sea, it is $135 per barrel. So while Brent is at $119, $120 per barrel. It's the Saudi Light, which is $135 per barrel, and in some instances it is being sold on premium, just like we used to give premium on cars for early supply because of higher demand from Saudi refineries. Now, even if it comes down, it would hover around $100 per barrel. Now at $100 per barrel, just to give you a number, 10% increase in oil price directly leads to a 0.5% reduction in GDP and 1% increase in inflation. So already around oil has gone up around 40 to 45%, which mean that about 2% shrinkage in our GDP and about 4 to 5% increase, direct increase in inflation, and then the indirect impact of inflation would be even higher. Now, for the people of Pakistan, the situation would be difficult because government doesn't have fiscal cushion, for example, to reduce levy or to keep on subsidizing the fuel. Now, if fuel cannot be subsidized and if the levies they cannot be reduced, or if the capacity payment charges they cannot be negotiated, which means that the solar panel, all the consumers, they would try to shift to solar panel as much as the government would not like them to do. But even then, the spiral effect of this inflation that would hit in the next fiscal year.
Okay.
On top of it, the supply of fertilizers for Kharif crop that would be sown in summer. We have the ample supply of fertilizer, but for next Rabi, next wheat crop, if the gas prices remain too high, or if gas supplies remain curtailed, then it means that it would be shortage of urea, or urea would be too expensive, and that would directly affect
Yes, that would directly affect food production, of course. Ammar Sahab, finally then, what about this, obviously the fact that we're not getting any LNG at all. Our prime supplier is now in its, their own production has also stopped. How serious could that be?
As I said earlier, if this were three years back, it would have been much more serious. But it actually is a blessing in disguise. Do you see anything around you that says, okay, you know what, LNG is in there and the world is crashing down around you? No, it's not. Because again, the urea, we use indigenous gas for urea. It's complete urea security. Food security is there. I mean, we paid quite a bit through various subsidies over the years just to have that kind of food security, and that ensures that we can wade our way through and not be reliant on imported gas for that. And similarly, energy, what was happening was, because of the contracts with Qatar earlier, a lot of local gas was being curtailed. It couldn't be produced. But now the local gas production is coming online. You've got a lot of imported coal that is coming online, is online as well. So you could have seen maybe 6 to 8 hours of rolling load shedding right now, but that's not happening. And there is a design behind this, because a lot of hydel, a lot of imported coal, a lot of nuclear and curtailed gas is coming into the system, and that's ensuring that there is no load shedding. Yes, there are deficits, and the deficits are largely in the piping infrastructure, the gas that is transmitted through pipelines, domestic gas, that is definitely being curtailed, but that is, I would say, very small price to pay for all the kind of chaos that could have ensued if this wasn't managed well. So yes, LNG numbers have significantly reduced, but that means we are much more resilient, much more reliant on more internal sources of, let's say, energy, rather than being solely reliant on imported gas. So I think it's resilience has shown it's a step in the right direction. Maybe going forward, we may not need more RLNG either, and then the question would be, what do we do with the terminals, so on and so forth. So things just keep on evolving, and it's too early to say that what's going to happen. But for the time being, Pakistan has waded through the crisis much better than, let's say, it would have done in 22 or 2019 or even before that.
On that slightly hopeful note, I'd like to thank both my guests for joining today and sharing their analysis.